today you saw various pieces of papers on the seats. There's a new piece of paper that was sent to you by email. It should have been in your packet, but there was a mix-up. It's the other statement that the 2020 Vision Campaign is working on. It's given to you for purposes of feedback. We're not going to be adopting it here. We're probably not even going to adopt it at the board meeting. The plan is more to take it to the executive conference, which will be held here around Armistice Day later this year here in Ypres. So, but we want you to look at it and we'll have a discussion of it at the end of the day. I want to make sure you had it. You didn't have to hunt for it in your computers.
Okay. We have 3 more speakers in this session. Yesterday we heard about the destruction of Hiroshima, which ended in a dreadful firestorm. We will next hear about the Hamburg firebombing. Both these... Yeah, I know. I thought they were coming together. Yeah. Okay, but then we do it the other way around. This is the way it goes when you're bombarded 2 seconds before you have to go on stage to morning chair. But okay, so first we do only Granollers in Spain with, and then I'll come back and give an introduction on Hamburg. Cities can play a major role in the opinion making against mass destruction weapons. We listened to Carme Barbani of the city of Granollers in Spain, and then after that Holger Guseveld of the city of Hamburg. And first of all, Granollers in Spain. You have the floor, please.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting the city of Granollers to take part in this conference on the centenary of the use of weapons of mass destruction, on the centenary of the gas attack on Ypres. I will be talking about the Spanish Civil War, the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939, and also about the air raid attacks on the rearguard civilian populations, which affected thousands of people in towns and cities. And I'm going to speak about Granollers, about the air raid that took place on 31st of May 1938, and how the memory of this bombing have served and still do serve as the foundations for the city's project for peace. A project we are working with this slogan, Granollers, a city open to peace. As you all know, the Spanish Civil War was the result of an uprising against the Republican government, and the conflict took place between the 2 world wars, so it's the same, maybe the same war that in the half 20th century. But before going into the case of Granollers, I should like to make a few comments about the Civil War. The first one is that it was a civil war, but it did become an international conflict. As you may know, the Nazi Germany and the fascist Italy supported the rebels, and the Soviet Union supported the Republic. And in addition, the conflict attracted thousands of people from around the world. It is estimated that some 35,000 foreign volunteers from over 50 countries joined the ranks of the Republican government. They were members of the international brigades, people who came to fight for freedom and democracy against fascism. We had also lots of journalists, writers, photojournalists interested in the Spanish Civil War who came from all over the world, and we have their testimony. The second point I wanted to say is that when we speak about the Civil War, the Spanish Civil War, we have to speak about the cities and civilian as military target. This photo is one of the bombings of Barcelona in March 1938. And at the moment, the victims were no longer in the front line of fighting. The victims were civilians hundreds of kilometers away from the front line. These air raids in populated areas were test runs for a tool of war that was later widely used in the Second World War and is still in use today. From that point of view, Spain was the testing ground for this kind of bombings. And one last thing before about the Civil War. We cannot talk about the Spanish Civil War without saying something about what happened after the war. We can't ignore the long and the dark years of the dictatorship and how the dictatorship conditioned the way we work and we deal with our memories and about our politics of remembrance. We have to speak of the efforts made by many to restore the dignity of the vanquished, oh, excuse me, I didn't say it very properly, vanquished, of those who suffered the consequences of brutal repression, of those who have never received any tribute. But let's move on to Granollers. All we know, many cities have become associated forever with the tragic events of their past. Ypres is one of them. For example, in Spain, the town of Guernica is linked to Picasso's painting. And likewise, maybe less famously, Granollers also was marked by its bombing. And the news of the attack on the town was circulated worldwide via press reports. The air raids on the rearguard populations were used above all by the rebels, were used by both parts, Republican armies and rebels armies, but above all by the rebels. This is a map showing the main bombings around Spain. There are lots of cities who received these attacks: Madrid, Guernica, Durango, Valencia, Tarragona, Lleida, Barcelona, Figueres. These cities were heavily bombed by the German Condor Legion, the Italian Legionary Aviation, and by the Franquist aviation. So, at the moment, the air power became a decisive weapon, and the Italian and German aviation corps were a definitive factor in the victory of the Franco's army. Catalonia and the eastern of Spain were the areas most hit by the new aerial warfare. That case, Granollers, I don't know if you can see it, is here, okay, close to Barcelona. The island of Mallorca, the airport of Mallorca, served as a big aircraft carrier from where the aircrafts attacked the Mediterranean coast. This is the map showing the attacks, the air raids in Catalonia. 140 air raids that left at least 7,400 dead. That is it means the 70% of those killed by air raids in the whole of Spain. In the attacks of Barcelona, it was Mussolini in person who ordered the attacks. He ordered a violent action over Barcelona with, he said, with a continuous hammering over the time. Okay? It means the non-concentrated bombings, but diversifying time and space to increase the sense of panic and helplessness of the civilian population. And the main objective of these attacks was undermine the moral of the Republicans. However, while the Spanish Civil War served as a testing ground for weaponry, it is also the way for innovative journalism. You all know about some journalists, writers, photographers who took an interest in the conflict. We know the names such as George Orwell or Hemingway or Saint-Exupéry, or the names of photographers like Robert Capa, Guerrataro, and so on, another. All of them were convinced that a Republican victory would lead to the collapse of fascism through Europe. So this was the main reason to fight in the Spanish Civil War. And all of them were scared by what they lived through and what they saw during those few years. Today, here's the photo, very famous, of Robert Capa and Guerrataro in the Spanish Civil War. Today I wanted to introduce the Civil War through by way of one Flemish journalist, is Robert Mouchet. He's a Flemish journalist who was in Granollers the day the city was bombed. And, oh well, we have her daughter here sitting over there, Carmen. I'm so happy she's here. I hope you have time to talk to her. What happened in Granollers? Granollers on 31st of May 1938 at 9 o'clock in the morning, 5 Italian Savoia S-79 planes serving General Franco attacked the town. This is the photo of the aircraft. The planes dropped 60 bombs on the city. It was a peak hour when people were on their way to work, to school, or shopping. There was registered 224 dead and 165 wounded. At the time, the town had 14,000 inhabitants. The targets of these attacks, according to the Italian and the Spanish military archives, are the power plants for the purpose of leaving the town's industries without the power supply, strategic communication points such as the railway, an airfield, and a bridge over the river, but no one of these targets was hit. The city received more air raids at the end of January of 1939 as a support strategy for the advancing Franquist troops. And then again, dozens of people were killed, many wounded, and housing and industries were damaged. As I said earlier, Robert Mouchet was in Granollers that day as a war correspondent. he explained what he saw there. And we recently learned about this presence, about Musha's presence in the city. And it was thanks to a novel by a Basque author, it's Kirmen Ribe. The novel is this. On the left, the original version in Basque, in Euskera, is Musha, the name of the novel. On the right, here you have the Catalan version, is What Moves the Wall. And I'm telling you the story of Musha and his connection with the Civil War and with the city of Granollers, because his story and bring together many interlocking stories and serve as to illustrate the work we are doing in Granollers, in remembrance and collecting testimonies and trying to link stories, personal stories out. The novel recreates the Musha's life based on the documents collected and conserved by his daughter Carmen. And Musha, in 1937, he hosted a young Basque girl called Carmen, because his daughter's name is Carmen. This girl was one of the 19,000 children who were evacuated from Bilbao after the bombing of Guernica and all the other cities in the north. And they were sent to different European countries for safety. And this young girl changed the writer's life and made him even more committed to society and human rights. And it was this commitment that brought him to Barcelona as war correspondent in 1938. Among the documents Carmen has recovered, there is one that refers to the air raid in Granollers, with which Musha experienced it firsthand. This experience scared him forever, because he gets very frustrated because he hears someone dying among the debris, and he was unable to save this person. We decided, after reading this, to invite Carmen, Musha, and the writer to share our commemoration of the bombing in Granollers, because first, as I told you before, there are lots of links between the refugees from the Basque Country. Our city received lots of refugees from the north of Spain, from the south also. The people from the north of Spain came through France and had to cross the border to Catalonia from France. And we have also links with Guernica and with the people who is working in this project in historical memories in the north. So for us it was, very interesting approach this, so decided to invite. And Carmen said, I'm going to reproduce her words. He said here, she's here. He said, my name is Carmen. I am from Belgium, and I am the daughter of Robert Musha. Exactly 75 years ago, in this very place, my father witnessed the bombing of Granollers. He was here as a war correspondent for a Belgian socialist newspaper. He did what he was supposed to do, write articles and take photos to make the world aware of the atrocity of the Spanish Civil War. He experienced this drama in a very personal way, as we gained the news from the following words that he wrote to his best friend, the well-known author Johan Leisner. This is a very nice text I wrote here, because I'm sure you will be more able to understand it and to read it, because I'm not so sure to be able to spell it properly, to speak out properly. But in short, he said, only once did I experience such great pain. It was in Spain, immediately after the bombing of Granollers, because Moshe knew that across the way somewhere someone was dying. Okay? And he felt powerless, and he felt someone died at the moment, because he said, and suddenly silence, a person had died. And the last sentences say that the silence enveloped me, the emptiness of death. To this day, whenever I think back on those times, it is only with a feeling of rejection against such crime. Robert Moshe was, as you can see, impressed. This is a very good testimony, I think, because it reflects the feelings at the moment. There are not memories written later, years later. It's just what he felt at the moment. And Robert Moshe died at the beginning of May in 1945 in the bombardment of the Bay of Lübeck in the Baltic Sea, along with more than 7,000 prisoners from the concentration camp, because he was in the last year of his life in a concentration camp. At the moment, his daughter Carmen was 2 years old, and she discovered that her father had been a war reporter by means of the book of Johann Deisner, In Memoriam Robert Moshe. Years later, he discovered his articles and pictures, and thanks to her, we have now these materials. This story is only a story of one person, one family, but for us, the city of Granollers, we have been able to add a new voice to our narrative of the right. I think the participation of Carmen in the commemorations close another cycle that of her father's connection with Granollers. And this is why one part of our program of recovering memories that we work every year on 31st of May. After that, after the war, I told you about the dark and long dictatorship. Well, just two points, because after the fall of Barcelona at the end of January in 1939, thousands of people, you have seen many pictures like this, I'm sure, thousands of people fled into exile. It's estimated that in the first weeks of 1939, almost for 500,000 of people crossed the frontier into France. It was people from all conditions and walks of life who were fleeing from Franco's advancing troops. And the other part of the border, the refugee camps and very hard living conditions awaited them. After that, many exiles managed to reach France, but once there, they again find themselves trapped by the war again. And shortly afterwards, some of them died in concentration camps. It's estimated that around 10,000 Spanish Republicans died in the concentration camps. This is not a lot of people in Spain know this or is aware about this number of people who died in the Second World War. This is a photographer. He was a photographer in Mauthausen, and thanks to he could make copies of the photos and preserve to the end of when the liberation of the camps, and he was in the Nuremberg trials. And also another point about the exile, the exile of many intellectuals who had supported the Republic left Spain in the most abject cultural poverty. This is maybe I put here the name of Pablo Casals. He was a musician, he was in exile, and he decided not to return it to Spain until the democracy was restored. After that long period, or maybe the long period of the dictatorship, appropriated the story of the Civil War, and it was not when the democracy was again in Spain, we could begin the process of constructing a public memory. But we must not forget, however, that during the transition to democracy, it was decided to leave the past behind. It means an amnesty law that was passed pardoning political crimes perpetrated by the Frankists. And in this context, Granollers, the historian, began researching the air right and making it public knowledge, and there was a big commemoration in 1988, 50 years after it happened. And it was a commemorative ceremony in which a great many citizens participate. And year after year, on the 31st of May, we have an important commemoration in the city. It is school activities, for example. And in 2008, the Peace Culture, the Center of Culture for Peace, was opened with the aim of preserving these memories. Preserving the memories of the people who lived at that moment, and also preserving the heritage of memories. The Center for Culture of Peace concentrates the resources and information to do with our historical memory, and hosts a permanent exhibition on the Civil War and the bombardment of Granollers, and has information about the Catalan network of remembrance area. We have many cities who has the same remembrance areas, and is working like a network. We have a documentation center with publications and access to the interviews database about the moment. And we schedule guided walks and school visits. By the moment we have been working in the memories of the bombings, but our most immediate objective is to advance in our historical research of the period of the Franco dictatorship and the restoration of the democracy. And we are working also in other projects. One is collecting the historical memory from the various city neighborhoods of Granollers. And together with this, we have also been working on recovering the remembrance areas. This is one of the shelters, the bomb shelters, and integrating these remembrance areas into the cityscape, so they can become part of the city's daily life. In fact, they are. At present, there are 2 recovered shelters open to visitors. We have also a signposted city walk, which is routed through the areas hit by the bombs in 1938. There's the tiles on here. And a lot of activities take place around them, open days, guided tours, activities for school groups. The commemorations, every year commemoration is aimed at making known and accessible the city's remembrance areas, and as well working with schools on the culture of peace and strengthening our relationship with other bounded cities. We work also in connecting with the idea of peace in programs of promotion of civic coexistence. This is a meeting between young people and testimonies of the bombing of the city, because there are two moments when the populace of the city have meet together to work on these issues. One is when they are 8, 9 years old. They are children. They make a commemoration, and out the students of the 17, 18 years, they have a joint activity every year. This is a meeting in which they commit with the testimonies of the bombing about preserving their memories and about transmitting to the next generations. We have also cooperation to development, also projects, and networking with cities. In this case, this is with Mayor for Peace. And also it means to organize meetings, organize activity related with other bombed cities around the world. This is in the framework of an exhibition about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki we had last February. There is a meeting between Aniba Kusha, Mrs. Kashimoto, yes, and Ana Maria, his person who lived the bombing of Granollers. So this kind of encounters, this kind of links are very useful for youth also, but for these people too, because at last they live the same circumstances. Okay, but just a few words to now, because our reflection, 75 years after the end of the Spanish Civil War, we still know so little about certain matters. Okay? We are working, but the truth is we are too late, because most of the testimonies doesn't exist anymore. The Civil War would not be studied until the 80s, and 40 years after the war ended, and there still remain many aspects to be covered and many victims to be acknowledged. Okay? Which is, sometimes it happens moving situations. Some months ago, it came a man of over 80 years old that traveled more than 100 kilometers to bring us some documents he had conserved, which belonged to his father, who died in the bombing of Granollers. He was working in the city. And so we're pleased when those who lived the testimonies of the bombing let us record their testimonies, and we receive also requesting information about victims of the bombing from their relatives, from France or from another parts. So I think I have told you the story of a bombing of a small town far from the front in 1938 in the work of the Flemish journalist. But because I'm sure somewhere in some archive there must be certainly many stories we know nothing about, because every day they are opening archives, they are opening libraries, they are opening personal files, and these facts come to light, and these documents will afford very valuable material for better understanding that conflict that left a deep scar on several generations and still is I think it still is affecting the Spanish society at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for this presentation of one of the earliest episodes of aerial bombardment, which of course can cause as much and more harm even than the shelling that we've seen earlier. And we go on with destruction of cities. Yesterday we heard about Hiroshima, which result of that is a firestorm, as we heard yesterday and as we know. Next there will be the Hamburg firebombing. Both of those cases were perpetrated by Allied forces, but the fire also was introduced not only by pure bombing, as we've seen in the 1930s in the Spanish Civil War, but also during the Second World War. The Luftwaffe of the Nazi government first applied this technique in advance of the ground assault on Stalingrad. The center of the city was incinerated in a powerful firestorm, leaving a moonscape of gutted and destroyed buildings in which the deadly street-by-street fighting then unfolded. It is estimated that 40,000 civilians died on the night of the firebombing attack. In the next 3 months, over 2 million soldiers died in the repulsion of the German invasion. We had hoped that today the mayor of Volgograd, the modern name of Stalingrad, would be able to join us today for a talk. This was not possible, as Mayor Kozolapov's letter explains. I quote from what he writes to us: "Let me express my gratitude for your invitation to take part in the conference. Unfortunately, previous commitments render me unable to attend, as within the same dates I will have to participate in the organization of the exhibition dedicated to the 70th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War, as we all know. The Second World War is called in Russia, which is to be held in the European Parliament. I utterly regret that Volgograd will not be represented at such a meaningful conference, as its acute team and intensive program promise to make it a true milestone in the history of international struggle for global disarmament." So that is the message of the mayor of Volgograd, and this leads us to our next speaker and the next event of firebombing of Hamburg. And today with us is Holger Güseveld of the city of Hamburg to talk about that. Holger Güseveld has a wealth of experience working as a conceptual consultant, texter, children's author, and developing and organizing advertising campaigns and events. In the mid-1980s, Holger established and coordinated a campaign which saw 200,000 children from around the world write to US President Reagan and the USSR President Gorbachev, and had a positive effect on nuclear disarmament talks. He now runs a company dealing with innovative product development, where, for example, he has set up creative projects for the further education of prisoners. He's also a project consultant with the World Future Council. But here with us to talk about the Hamburg firebombing is Holger Güseveld. You have the floor.
Good morning. thank you very much, City of Ypres, Mayors for Peace, to give me the possibility to speak here about the tragedy which happened to Hamburg in 1943. Let me begin with speaking a little bit about my daughter. When she was 3 years old, my wife, me, and my daughter, we went to a wonderful fun fair, which was organized by an artist, the Austrian artist André Heller, very poetic, done in the style of 1900. So my daughter was so delighted, you just can't imagine. And unfortunately, the security measures had also been nostalgic. That means it was something like 1900, the security, and there had been floodlight close to the ground, and my daughter was not very well covered, and my daughter touched this and burnt her forefinger. It was terrible. So we went home at once. She held the finger out of the window to cool it a bit. At home, she held the finger for more than an hour in ice water to cool it. She cried and cried. And when I think about the firestorm, I think how much it hurts to burn one finger. Sorry. When I think about the firestorm, I also think how I loved to play in the rubble, in the ruins, when I was a little boy. I was born in 42. That means when the firestorm was in Hamburg, I was about 11 months old. We had not been, had not problem with this because we lived a bit about 15 kilometers away. There was a little bombing, but close to our house, but that's it. But after the war, about when I was 7, 8 years old, 49, 50 year, I loved to play in the rubble. There had been a lot of it, and it was it's so interesting for boys because you find pots you can drum on, or you find water taps or wooden bars. We loved wooden bars. We could make fire with it. We loved to make fire, and we put everything in it. And also these little yellow clumps we found. There had been some yellow clumps, we didn't know what it is. Threw it in the fire, it burned like hell. And it was stinking. That was interesting. Wonderfully stinking. It was soft, like warm wax. And then we, all the time when we made a fire, at the end, we put the fire out. And you know how little boys are. It's like, you know this mannequin? Famous? So we did it like that. And it worked for the woods, but it didn't work for these little clumps. They stopped burning, suddenly they started again. Very interesting. So we took a shovel and onto this burning clump, and we went to the Ulster, the river in Hamburg. We threw it in. It went on burning. It went on burning for a certain time, even under the water. And with bubbles coming out of it. White smoke, stinking smoke, and bubbling with a wonderful noise. We really loved it. We did this for days. Yeah. Later on, when I was already a young adult, around 20 years old, I told my mother what we did. She had no idea. And she told me there was phosphorus. And she spoke about the Hamburg nights of bombing, where people burned like torches. And they jumped into the canal and went on burning because the body had been touched with this phosphorus. And yeah, was no help. The firestorm was the climax of the so-called Operation Gomorrah, named after the famous Bible's text, "Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens." In our case of Hamburg, the Lord was Arthur Harris, Air Chief Marshal of Great Britain's Royal Air Force, who wanted to totally destroy Hamburg with a series of extreme air raids. The main difference was that with him, it rained phosphorus instead of brimstone. A top-secret letter from Harris to the commanders of his 6 bomber groups helps to understand his intentions. I cite, "The importance of Hamburg, the second biggest city in Germany with a population of 1.5 million, is well known and need not to be especially emphasized. The total destruction of this city would promote immense results through the reduction of the industrial capacity on the enemy's war machine. This would, together with the effect on the German morale, which will be felt throughout the entire land, play a very important role in the shortening of the war." Today, we know that the war hadn't been shortened, and it went on until 45. So, what did it help? The British had been very well prepared by lessons learned from Germany for attacking Hamburg, who already had bombed Rotterdam, London, Warsaw, and most successfully, Coventry. Goebbels was very proud of it. "The reports from Coventry are horrendous," he wrote. "An entire city literally wiped out. The English are no longer pretending. All they can do now is wail." But they asked for it. The British Air Command didn't wail at all, but studied the German methods of destroying Coventry and transferred their findings to the city of Lübeck. The bombing of Lübeck then became very successful and became the blueprint for Hamburg. The Operation Gomorrah consisted of 4 attacks. The first one on 24 July 43, the last 3rd of August. Each attack began with an innovative device named Windows. It consisted of metallized paper strips. Each bundle had 2,200 strips, made of coarse black paper with aluminium foil stuck on the one side. British scientists had theorized that such metallized strips floating in the air would swamp German radar with false echoes. It worked perfectly. Already in the first raid, more than 15 million strips dropped over Hamburg. The radar was totally blinded, and the flak had no idea in which direction to fire. They didn't see any plane. The main attack happened in the night from 27 to 28 July 43. Shortly before midnight, 787 aircraft started to bomb. 3 hours later, they had unloaded 2,230 explosive bombs and 325,000 incendiary bombs over the city. The unusually dry and warm weather and the concentration of the bombing in one area created a vortex and whirling updraft of superheated air, culminating in a 300-meter high tornado of fire, with winds up to 240 kilometers per hour, temperatures of 800 degrees Celsius, incinerating more than 21 square kilometers of the city. Asphalt streets burst into flame, and fuel oil from damaged and destroyed ships, barges, and storage tanks spilled into the water of the canals and the harbor, causing them to ignite as well. The majority of deaths attributed to Operation Gomorrah occurred on this night. The estimates are about 40,000 people. This happened, as I said, in July 43. But some fires still burned until October. The British had not been alone with the Gomorrah child. The Americans saw and bombed during the day, especially the industry, the port, while the British took the nights and the civilians. On the whole, Operation Gomorrah killed 40,600 people, left 37,000 wounded, and caused some 1 million German civilians to flee the city. Over 250,000 homes and houses were destroyed. That's about half of the quantity which existed. The industrial losses were severe. Hamburg never recovered to full production. Figures given by German sources indicate that 183 large factories were destroyed out of 524, and 4,118 smaller factories out of 9,068. Local transport systems were completely disrupted and did not return to normal for some time. Hamburg was hit by air raids another 69 times before the end of World War II. In total, the RAF dropped 22,580 tons of bombs on Hamburg. But these are just figures. The truth is in the testimonies of the witnesses. For example, Klaus Wilken, he reports, close to Berliner Tor, I saw everywhere figures lying on the street. I thought that these are dressmakers' dummies. But suddenly I recognized that they are all human beings, petrified in the strangest positions. And I don't know if they had been adults or children, as they only had a length of about 1 meter. Or Henny Clark. She experienced the firestorm in Hammerbrook, one of the preferred targets of the Allies. Hammerbrook had a very high population density. The ordinary people lived there, port workers, sailors, craftsmen, families with low income and many children, a vibrant district full of pubs, cafes, dancing places, with a wonderful community life. And politically, mostly on the left, just like in the other districts which the Allies mostly attacked. It's so strange. The British bombed their potential allies in the fight against Hitler. In this night, Henny Clark is in a shelter on the other side of the street, opposite of her apartment. She writes, the light was already no longer burning. The candles as emergency lighting did not get enough oxygen, and it became unbearably hot. My little baby was covered by a wet woolen blanket in its pram, so that it would not suffocate. Thank God we still had a jet of water. I don't know why, but suddenly the devil possessed me. I wanted to go into our house one more time. Perhaps I could still get some things out, photographs, such things. But as I stood in the corridor, the ceiling was already crackling, and I wanted to go to my father's desk in the living room. But there I saw only fire. The blazing and burning drapes flew in the room, the window panes burst, and there was a hissing and crashing all around me. I couldn't manage the few steps to the desk which stood at the window. My legs felt paralyzed. While dashing out of the apartment, I hadn't even grabbed an article out of the wardrobe. I ran back to the shelter as fast as possible. The streets were already burning. The firestorm was now raging through all the streets. When I reached the shelter door, I suddenly saw a neighbor who took his bed cover and wanted out. None of us could stop him. We saw him still, but then only as a living torch, carried by the firestorm, flying through the air. Our situation in the shelter was almost helpless. We were surrounded by fire and would probably die from hypothermia or carbon monoxide. Now what to do? It was a fact that behind the house was the Kammer Canal. But how could we reach there? Or to the other side, to the street named Stadtdeich, and then to the upper Elbe? Should we go there? Well, this was, in this moment, a mirage. And then at the last moment, a neighbor came with the idea to attempt a life-saving breakout through the wall, which was half stone. My man remembered a pointed pickaxe that stood in a corner. And that was our deliverance. The men hammered out chunks of the wall, and we tested to see if the pram would pass through, and it did. We came out at Stadtdeich, but into a thundering, blazing hell. The streets were burning, the trees were burning, and the tops of them were bent right down to the street. Burning horses out of the nearby hauling business ran past us. The air was burning. Simply everything was burning. The hurricane was so strong that we could scarcely breathe. And I still know today that I screamed, "Don't fall down," at my mother. Our goal was the harbor shed at the Elbe River, a distance of some 100 meters. We reached it and waited there till the morning. On the following day, the sky was black until late in the evening. Hamburg was covered by a cloud of black smoke to a height of 7 kilometers. Klaus Mann, the son of Thomas Mann, said at the end of these bombing nights, "Hamburg, as I knew it, will never exist again. The city will certainly be rebuilt, but its face and atmosphere will fundamentally be changed." Sometimes I think about his words when I go by car direction Autobahn. Then I have to pass through Hammerburg. What do I see? Soulless office buildings, warehouses, shipping agencies, dull and ugly factories all over. The streets only made for cars. No bed, no family, no children, no small old streets, no houses to live. All gone. Together with wonderful humor, the songs, the slang, the joy, the powerful way of living of Hamburg's port workers. When I pass through Hammerburg, I often think of the burnt finger of my daughter, of myself playing with fire and phosphorus and the devils. And since I prepared this speech, I also think of a woman with a suitcase. It was the daughter of a witness who wrote down what her mother had told her. I said, "My mother was 15 years old. The day after the firestorm, she fled out of the hell of her district and went on a streetcar. She recalls a lady singing a lullaby and rocking a suitcase. The lady looked at my mum and asked if she would like to see her children. My mum said nothing. The lady opened the suitcase to show the charred remains of her 2 children. Why? Why does such things happen? Why do human beings this to human beings? I don't know. I have no answer to them. No answer. I only know one thing. We shall never give up struggling for peace and the total abolition of such weapons. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Holger, for this very moving witness account, in many, many ways a witness account of lived and passed on accounts of the Hamburg fire. The last speaker of this morning, Rajesh Surani, is the founder and director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, a group of lawyers and activists that promote international standards of human rights, especially the right to self-determination and rule of law and the creation of democratic and civic institutions. Mr. Surani was a recipient of the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award in 1991, given each year to an individual whose courageous activism is at the heart of the human rights movement and in the spirit of Robert F. Kennedy's vision and legacy. He was an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience in 1985 and 1988. And member of the International Committee of Jurists, EXCO, and IDIL, EXCO. He was also Vice President of the International Federation of Human Rights. He has long been active in cases of Palestinian deportation and in monitoring conditions of Israeli prisons and detentions. Mr. Surani, please give you the floor.
I just have heard the last 2 speakers, and I do feel they were speaking on my behalf. They are telling me some of the stories we are having in our part of the world. Simple difference. What they said, what they told us, something happened 75 years ago. And the difference that we are living the mathematics and the chemistry of a real war crime happening now. Not happening, and people don't know about it. It's very well legal documented. It's known with names, dates, hours, faces. A lot of these war crimes broadcasted live on air at the real time. Not by a Palestinian, but by all major leading international human rights organizations. Not only that, but also by Israeli human rights organizations as well. And all this going on unnoticed. It's vice versa. We say accountability needed always. And it's a must to deter and not to make it happen again. That's what's happening in our case. License to kill. More immunity, more protection, and giving the ugly example of rule of jungle, not the rule of law. We didn't invent Geneva Conventions as the Palestinians. Geneva Conventions we just made because of the stories you told and we just had. To protect civilians at the time of war, not peace. When the Jews were persecuted in Europe, we didn't participate in that. And when they fled to the safe haven, and part of it was Palestine. And when they came to Palestine, they lived a very decent life. And we never ever thought we would be the victim of the victim. It's Kafka. So bitter. In '67, Israel recognized it occupied the occupied territories in Gaza, West Bank, including Jerusalem, for 43 years. For 43 days. After 43 days exactly, they said, sorry, we are not occupiers. This is administered or disputed territories. And that means Geneva Convention doesn't apply. Civilians has no protection whatsoever. From there, long journey began. And all the way long, by the name of security, civilians always were in the eye of the storm and were the target. But if that's related to Israeli government policy, that's fine. I worked as a lawyer for the last 35 years on all aspects related to occupation. And I can assure you that even the fantastic Israeli civil judiciary, which has first-class judges, first-class prosecutors, first-class lawyers, very schizophrenic. It's first-class when it comes to the Israeli Jewish citizen, when it comes to Palestinian, whether Palestinian citizen of Israel or Palestinian from the occupied territories. It's very schizophrenic, racist, and it gave all the way long legal cover for literally war crimes described in international law, international humanitarian law, and human rights. From the Geneva Conventions till the ICC Rome Statute Charter. Torture is legal. And it applies from children 12 years old and on. Deportation, extrajudicial killing. And the list is very, very long. When also accords were signed, great hopes raised in different parts of the world, but nobody noticed one simple thing. There was total absentia of a word talking about international law, international humanitarian law, and the human rights. Not a single one. Also, accords were supposed to be concluded on May 4th, 1999. We are ahead of it. 22 years. In May 4th, 1999, we were supposed to practice our right of self-determination, independence, and having a Palestinian state. After 22 years, what we are having? A state of siege, suffocating economically, socially, and otherwise Gaza, turning it to be literally as animal farm, international community dumping some food and medicine for the people there, Jerusalem state of ethnic cleansing and Judaization, and West Bank, ugly new brand of apartheid. And in the last 22 years, there was one simple slogan, not by Israel, by the West, especially US and Europe. We have to victimize rule of law, democracy, and the human rights for the sake of peace and security. And all the way along, we said that's big wrong. That will lead to nowhere. That will lead to another war or wars. No contradiction between peace, security, rule of law, democracy, and human rights. It's vice versa. For peace and security, you need rule of law, democracy, and human rights. If it doesn't work like that, nothing will work. And the harvest, obvious. In 5 years, in Gaza, the 365 square kilometers, 2 million people almost, 3 wars, 3 real offensive, F-16s, Apache, hundreds of drones, tanks, land-to-land missiles, gunships. It's like elephant in the garden. And the one who is paying dearly, civilians. Everybody said this is wrong. This is a crime. Israel should be held accountable. And they made from the Human Rights Council an investigation committee. and as usual denied access to Gaza to investigate. Everybody gave facts and information, and Goldstone made eloquent, first-class report, but it went unnoticed. And that's what encouraged Israel to do it again in 2012. And that's what encouraged Israel when they were not held accountable to do that again in 2014. And I talk about this last summer offensive. 2 Israeli young men, Israel said they were kidnapped and later discovered killed. And since then, and in 17 days before they discovered where they are, they were killing already 17 Palestinians, 11 of them under 14 years old. Unnoticed, hundreds of injuries. They rounded up the entire Hamas Jihad Islamic activists in the West Bank, thousands of them, and they imposed curfews, restriction movement in Hebron, Bethlehem, and other cities in the West Bank. One of the cases, one of the settlers bored in the mouth of young Palestinian Abu Khdeir petrol and put him in flame. And they were watching him. And things went unnoticed. They didn't satisfy with that, but they began to claim Gaza is responsible. And Gaza supplicated 51 days to land, air, and sea offensive. The 2 million people in 51 days, none of them thought the next morning will come. He or she, father, mother, children, or people you love, will be living till next day. Unbelievable. Bombs with 2 tons weight in one of the most dense populated areas